welcome to the Big Ten. My name is Brenda Nyamichaba. Now, unfortunately, my co-host Simba will not be joining me today for this Big Ten, but he will next week. And for the experts who are going to help us put into perspective today's Big Ten, we have begin today's Big Ten by starting with looking at the state of Kenya's economy by beginning with a peek at the status of Kenya's public debt. Now, the latest report by the Central Bank of Kenya indicates that the National Treasury borrowed an average of 2.1 billion shillings every day between January and February, ranking up 126.4 billion shillings in loans. This raised Kenya's public debt load to 5.4 trillion shillings. Now, the question we're asking, is there a cause for worry? Let's sort to find out.
Debt per se is not a bad thing, okay? It's what you do with the debt, number one. Number two, the composition of that debt. If you look at the debt, it's about 5.4 trillion, give or take. And it's almost split right in the middle. 2.7 domestic, 2.7 international. Now, what should worry us is the composition, because half of that amount is borrowed locally. And if you look at out of that amount, half of it comes from banks. 2.7, you talk about 1.4, 1.3. So that 1.3 has been starved off from that of the money available to lending to the local sector. So to the extent that we are borrowing locally, to me is a problem, because debt per se has no problem. Because for as long as it's going to capital projects, infrastructure project is good for the long term. And but to the extent that it takes money out of the local economy so the small guy cannot borrow, then you have a problem. The bank is in the business of managing risk. So if between lending to a government and lending to a small guy, they will take the government every day. And that's what is happening now. Because they have an interest cap, so they have to decide who they want to lend. The government is doing a good return on their paper. So they're just stashing the money there.
Staying on matters finance, county governments are once again on the spot over the state of their coffers. The latest report from the Controller of Budget shows that slightly over 58% funds spent at the county level went to personnel ambulance, with 80% of funds going towards development expenditure, far below the 30% threshold stipulated on the Public Finance Management Act. The question is, what does this say about the state of devolution in Kenya? Is development really happening in the counties?
I think devolution, we have to start from somewhere. We are now in devolution season 2. Season 1 is where we sent out governors who had no structure, no offices, no nothing. Now every devolved county at least has that infrastructure. Now the next stage is to try and bring down the operating costs. You see, the cost of the emoluments is almost 58-60%. So that has to come down, so that we have more money for development. But that's assuming that we're only relying on the exchequer. But if you look at the collection now, every county is upping its game in terms of how much they're collecting locally. So if we extrapolate that to season 3, 4, 5, you'll have a scenario where there'll be counties that will not need any government funding. They'll be able to raise all their money within themselves. And they'll do that by either increasing their revenue or bringing down their cost. Because most of those workforce, some of those workforces are bloated. So over time, and once we settle down, we'll shrink it to just deliver the business supposed to deliver. So for me, devolution, I think it's too early to demonize it. If you want to know the power of devolution, look at how banks have gone back to the mashinani. You know, they had flown away from those areas, but now money has gone back. So I'm telling you, devolution over time, even the people will start moving from cities back to their home areas, because it will make sense. Now the powers have been dispersed. Certain functions like health have been dispersed, have been devolved rather. So what will happen is people will slowly stop worrying about the national government and start worrying more about the county government. And when you get to that stage, even the political temperatures will lower drastically. Because what will bother you is who is your governor and who is your MCA. Those two people will really, in the long run, will be very important to you. Because those are the people who actually represent you.
Now, still on the national front, the government has embarked on the implementation of a national registration drive under a system formerly referred to as the National Integrated Identity Management System, better known as Huduma Number. The new system will ensure that all official identification documentations such as birth certificates, identification cards, driving licenses, passports, as well as tax registration documents are issued from a central source. Now, the question is, will Huduma Number be the game changer in the provision of services by the government?
The Huduma Number, as I understand it, is a way of consolidating all information the government has relating to its citizen or a citizen under one platform. Yeah. So if you're going to access government services, or if you're going to access certain services and you're required to produce your ID and a passport and a PIN, you don't have to carry all those documents together. So you'll just produce your Huduma Number, and through that number, someone will be able to check and see every number that you own, if it's KRA, if it's your PIN, whatever. Now, this information, the government already has it. Yeah, because you see KRA, the government, they already have your PIN. If it's NSSF number, NSSF has your number. If it's, let's say, for instance, your NHIF number, it's already, the government has it. The only difference is that now, all these numbers are with different bodies. Yeah, so now the government is trying to consolidate them. And they want to consolidate so that they can provide services efficiently according to the government. Now, is it necessarily a bad thing? It's not a bad thing. If the government has your information all at once and services will be delivered to you, someone easily, quicker, it's not a bad thing. Now, but there are certain challenges with all the government consolidating this information at once. Data is all personal identifiable data. This is information that can be used to identify who you are. Yeah, for instance, my ID number will identify me, my KRA number or PIN number will identify who I am. And if someone wants to use this information, or right now as it is, if someone wants to get information about you, they would have to go to KRA, they would have to go to the Register of Persons to get your ID number, they'd have to go to different bodies. But now with the Huduma Number, all they need to do is just go to one place and they have your number. So what if this information is accessed by someone who has got bad intentions? So what safeguards have been put in place to protect this data? And data now is like oil. Yeah, there's money in data. In America, it's said that Cambridge Analytica used data to influence the outcome of the elections. Yeah, as in it said when different applications, for instance, you've downloaded an app, let's say a Torch application, and it asks you for access to contacts, your contacts or your messages, because what they're trying to do, they're trying to get your data. So there is value in data. Data is valuable. Yeah. So what safeguards has the government put in place to protect this data that they are collecting? If you look at our law, we do not have a consolidated law that protects data. Yeah. Right now, the only law or the few laws that we have, and the major actually statute that protects data is in the Constitution. Under Article 31, we have got a right to privacy, and I think Article 31C provides that everyone or our citizens or everyone has a right to not necessarily have their data revealed or required. Yeah, that is the basis of data protection under our law. So we do not have in 2018 there was a data protection bill that provided different safeguards for information collected from you. So because you see, information collected from you, you need to consent to that information being collected. Once information has been collected from you, it's processed. So you need to know the information collected from you, how is it going to be processed. And again, you need to consent to this processing. So the biggest concern with Huduma Number is what safeguards are there.
Now, the last 2 months has seen the government formulate a slew of regulations that appear to have rubbed the affected sectors the wrong way. One case in point is a proposed regulation to bar dairy farmers from selling their milk produce directly to the consumer. The same can also be said of the ban on non-moving carrier bags that seem to have taken many consumers by surprise. This brings us to the question: is there a disconnect between the law and regulations formulated in Kenya?
There are different ways in which regulations are made. Ordinarily, you will find a law creating a body. I'll use an example, then NEMA, for instance. So NEMA is created under the Environmental and Management Act. So this is an act of parliament that is meant to coordinate environment management or deal with environmental management and coordination. Under the act, NEMA is created, the National Environmental Management Authority, and again also under the act, I think it's section 86, it empowers the minister in charge of environmental affairs to come up with regulations to better deal with management of the environment. So in 2017, for instance, the cabinet secretary at the time, I think was Judy Wakungu, she came up with regulations on banning plastics, plastic bag. Yeah. And the regulations, I think the Gazette was in May, regulations came in later, 6 months later, or the ban took effect 6 months later. So of course, before the ban took effect, there were a lot of court cases trying to challenge the ban. Now, in a situation like that, because of the ban, different industries or different manufacturers were affected, or different people were affected. There was a lady down the street who sells paper bags. Then there was a big industry, probably Industrialia, that is in charge of or is manufacturing these plastic bags. So this industry has invested a lot, has bought equipment, and will definitely be affected by the bags. Then even you as a consumer or as a shopper will be affected, because now it means if you're going for shopping, the bag you're used to getting after purchasing shopping or purchasing something, you will not have it. It means you have to give up or pay more to get a bag or something that is preferred to be economical or environmentally friendly. Now, I don't, in that view, in my case, personal view, I am agreeable with the ban, because we need to conserve our environment now and for our future kids. But you see, before that ban comes into effect, different people have to be consulted. That manufacturer has to be consulted. The lady who sells bags as a source of income or as her primary source of income has to be consulted. You as the consumer or the person who will pick up bags at the end of the day or when you're buying shopping, you have to be consulted. So different people have to be consulted in order to come up with regulations that balance all interests. And of course, factoring in that we are looking at conserving our environment or protecting our environment. So in a situation where different stakeholders have not been consulted and a ban is effected, these stakeholders will of course be granted, and of course they will turn to court. And if they've not been consulted, chances are the court will overrule and direct that public participation or stakeholder participation has to be conducted. We've seen this across in different sectors. You know, we've seen now even with matatus, when they were banned coming into the CBD, the court said that you need to consult different stakeholders. So yes, I would say parties have to be consulted, and there appears to be a disconnect between the government or the body coming up with these regulations. In most cases will be a regulator, and the people or the stakeholders who will be affected by these regulations.
Now moving on to the gambling sector, according to a survey by Metropol, Kenya has the highest proportion of youth engaged in betting in Africa at 76%. They spend an average of 5,000 shillings per month, mostly on football bets. And now another survey jointly conducted by Central Bank of Kenya, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics and FSD Kenya has revealed that 20% of adults in Kenya see betting as a good way of making money. This latest survey coming against the backdrop of recent announcement by the Interior Secretary, Dr. Fred Matiang'i, indicating that betting firms will have their licenses renewed on condition that they show proof of having paid all taxes due. This begs the question, is gambling a boon or bane for Kenya's economy?
What is the economic activity in betting? There's none. So we are slowly slipping into a place where we are living our life to chance. And when 60% of our youth have left their life to chance, it's worrying. It's very, very worrying. So I think the measures that are being taken are timely. I think we need to do something. Yes, everybody's right to do what they want. If you want to bet, that is your right. But I think we have to move towards responsible betting. People have to be shown the consequences. We have to stop showing this side, only the winning side of betting, because that's what we see. We also need to start seeing the losing side of betting. First of all, it portrays some hopelessness that has crept in, but driven by greed. Because you want to put 20 bob and get 20 million. That's greed. Because there's no economic activity you can do that can convert 20 shillings to 20, apart from betting. But what you forget is that for that 20 million, probably at 200, 300 million was collected. Okay? So as I said, I'm saying, betting has been there for time immemorial. Those who want to bet will bet. But the way we've simplified it, and the way we're not able to control who is actually betting, because we have children below the age of 18 who have access to a mobile handset. So for me, I will not do away with betting. I would push it towards responsible betting, where they are put to task to ensure, the same way we put to task the people of alcohol and cigarettes, to ensure that their products don't land on people who are underage. It's the same way. And maybe we also need to start controlling the kind of adverts that go out and when they go out, because the youth seem to be really sucking it in hook, line and sinker.
Now let's take a short commercial break and we'll be right back with the Big Ten as we have more business stories to share with you. Now remember, if you want to catch more episodes of the Big Ten, do follow us on our social media platforms. That is at Metropol TV KE. Stay right there. Know about business terms is something I love doing. You've heard of the word debit. This one I know you know.
We are keen on actively playing our role in positioning Kenya as an investment hub for East and Middle Africa.
The Big Ten. Remember, you can catch more episodes on all of our social media platforms on Metropol TV. Now, moving on to the corporate scene, the last 1 month has seen public companies that are listed on the Nairobi Securities Exchange post their trading results. During that period, 15 companies issued warnings on reduced profitability. Among the companies that issued profit warnings were drawn from diverse sectors ranging from banking, insurance, manufacturing and agriculture. Now the question is, what does this say about the state of Kenya's economy?
The reason they are failing are mostly for micro reasons rather than macro reasons, if you unpack them one by one. Yes, it sounds nice to lump 15 and say the economy is not doing well because 15 have issued a warning. But if you unpack them one by one, you'll see somebody in the banking sector. He's issued a profit warning, whereas banks have done 20 billion profit. It's not a macro issue. Definitely a micro issue. Either how you're doing your business. If you go to the some that are in manufacturing, the guys who are doing very well. So I'm saying the 15 Yes, there could be an element of macro, but most of it is driven micro in terms of how are they doing their business, how have they remained relevant in terms of changing. So it may be a coincidence. It may be that the macro factors, as minute as may be, are affecting all of them, but I think it's important not to lump them as 15. Yes, they are all listed, but I think it's good to unpack one by one, because I've looked at some of them, and the reasons they are completely diverse. Because if it was the same, then you would say it is the economy. Because, but when you use this word economy, what exactly do you mean? Because it could mean anything. Because as I say, sometimes when you're broke, you say there's no money in Kenya. But as you're saying that, there's somebody buying a new car. So sometimes it's good to say, mimi sina pesa. The repercussions are there, because the poor lose jobs. The poor will not get paid. So the repercussions are definitely dire. But those repercussions have nothing to do with what caused them. You see, what caused them probably is not the macro issue, as I'm saying, but the repercussions will be the same. Job losses will be the same across the board. Creditors will remain unpaid. Shareholders will wait for another year for dividend. Those ones will be the same. Yeah. But in terms of what caused, no, it's not the same.
Now, new data from the Communications Authority of Kenya now shows that Kenya's biggest telco operator, Safaricom, lost a further percentage point of subscriber market share in the period to the end of December, its fifth quarterly fall. The firm, part-owned by South Africans Vodacom and Britain's Vodafone, shared 0.9 percentage points of subscriber market share to 63.3%, compared with 71.9% in September 2017 when the losing streak started. Now the question is, what's behind Safaricom's sustained drop in market share, and what is the state of the competition in Kenya's mobile telephony sector?
If I can quote Michael Joseph, he once said that Kenyans are very peculiar people. And it's true, we are. Now, if you look at Safaricom, Airtel, Telcom, they have 30 million subscribers. But in Kenya, number one, number two, you'll have most people, probably half of those people have a second SIM card. Again, our peculiarity. Now, when you go further, if you look at the demographics, Safaricom will be more the corporate, the more mature in terms of demographics, the slightly older people. If you go to the younger people, you'll mostly find them in Telcom and Airtel. And then going by services, if you go for voice, most people are doing Airtel. If you're doing data, most people are doing Telcom. Then Safaricom, they're doing M-Pesa. That's broadly speaking. And that's why you see, if you look at even the voice revenue is falling for Safaricom specifically. So Safaricom, but by any measure of stretch of imagination, they're still a very big player. 30 million subscribers is not a small number. So again, as I'm telling you, when now they unpack the smaller details, is when they are losing a market share, and it's very minute. But in terms of the kind of income they're pulling down is big, because what they lose on voice, they more than make up in these other ones. So for me, I don't think Safaricom is still up there. I think the other two still have a long way to catch up. Yes, they are edging the market, but again, I think their strategy is to appeal to the younger, hoping that they'll grow with them, and they will take them, these people, later in life.
Now let's move to our related story, in which a survey conducted by Stanbic Bank Kenya has shown that the pace of activity in Kenya's private sector edged lower in March to its lowest in 16 months. The market Stanbic Bank Kenya Purchasing Managers Index for manufacturing and services fell to 51.0 from 51.2 in February on the back of a drop in agricultural productivity during the first quarter of this year.
Despite the manufacturing falling by a marginal amount, we can still be able to achieve the 6.3% annual growth in GDP. This will be contributed by the tea industry, which grew marginally to about 5.4%. Electricity and water supply which grew also marginally by about 8.6%. There was a growth also in the hydro and geothermal electricity production from 6.1 to 6.8%. And last but not least, the hotel industry, which was outstanding at 16%. So in my opinion, despite the fall in manufacturing, these are the sectors that I've outlined will more than weigh in to deliver the 6.3, if not more.
Meanwhile, the Central Bank of Kenya has yet to call upon commercial banks to go devote at least 1/5 of their loan portfolios to small and medium enterprises. The appeal appears to yet another moral persuasion to commercial banks to put more emphasis on the sector that accounts for the bulk of Kenya's informal sector. Will commercial banks heed to this appeal, and how can SMEs be better supported by commercial banks?
Number one, they will. Central bank is not asking. So when central bank says you do, they are the regulator, or they shut you down. That one, there's no discussion there. Number two, it's a good move. But then, don't forget, this will be aggregate figures. Let's say my book is 100 billion. So that means 20 billion has to be SMEs. So there would be nothing wrong with me lending 10 SMEs 2 billion each. So you see what I'm saying? So there's still a way around it, in that I could cherry pick the SMEs, because the idea behind that policy is to ensure that these guys who are starved of credit, who have no access to credit, get credit. But whether that policy will do that is another story, because you've talked about a percentage. You've not talked about how many people are supposed to be, or what are the minimum people you're supposed to give, and all that. And maybe that will be a policy change as they go along. Having said that, I think from a policy perspective, maybe what we need, banks, for as long as the government paper remains attractive, they'll continue packing their money there in droves. Because don't forget, their main motive is to make money. Give money and make sure it comes back. You have a depositor's money, you say interest on it and make money for your shareholder. The best way is to get from the depositor and put it in treasury bills, your interest, and put it back. Or give to a guy who may not be giving back to you. So, which brings me back to what the initial thing I'd said when we started the interview, and that is that if government can bring down the treasury bill rate, like you remember in 2003-04, the treasury bill rate came to below 1, it was 0.8%. That's when banks would call you and tell you that you qualify for a loan you've not applied for, because they had no choice. It was either that or shut down. So unless we go back there, banks will always find a way. Because don't forget, at the end of the day, they have to give a return to their investor. Yes, there are regulations to be found, but their ultimate is to minimize their risk. So as long as those options remain, that's what I'm telling you, take out the lend to government. And what could happen? You see, the 2.7 that the government is borrowing locally, if today by chance or by luck or whatever happened, that all that debt was externalized to a foreign lender, so that now we have no local borrowing, that money they would have no choice.
Now let's end the Big Ten on a positive note, as Kenya has been ranked among the top 3 most financially inclusive countries in Africa. In more specific terms, 82% of Kenya's population has access to formal financial services, an achievement that has been made possible through the use of mobile money platforms. That said, is there more that could be done to consider that 60% of Kenyans still use informal solutions such as chamas, savings at home, and borrowing from friends and shopkeepers to keep afloat?
That's a question that should worry bankers. Why are there so many people who are staying away from their product? With digital platforms, I can wake up at night and borrow from a platform in the middle of the night and get my money. But the thought of that, I have to get into a car, drive to an office, queue. Some of those are the problems. And I say these models like agency banking, that's the future, whereby you devolve these services to as near as your shopkeeper. That if I want something, I can go to my shopkeeper and an agent and I can do whatever I want. So, and people always follow path of least resistance. So So maybe these are so maybe banks are not as maybe they are more resistant than these other parts, and partly because of the way they are structured, the bureaucracy. But this other one where you just go into a platform and your SSD number, your ID number, and they tell you qualify for this and you get it, because people want their money that time, especially in SME. Let's say somebody is going to buy something from the market, they want the money in the morning, and probably by evening they've paid it off. Yeah, so it's, again, as I told you, this question, if I were a banker, I would want to think about why such a big segment is taken away from me.
Now, we have reached the end of today's Big 10. I'd like to thank our experts who helped put into perspective today's Big 10. Remember, you can catch these episodes on our social media at Metropol TV KE. My name is Brenda Nyapichaba. See you next time.